I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the most influential basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. Andrew Kuo is not on vacation. Andrew Kuo, how are you?
Good. I feel ashamed because there's no drama when you say my name because I'm always here, man.
I know. I don't even give you a dramatic pause.
Because sometimes Jordan is here and we miss him, and every time you say he's on vacation, we're happy for him, but we're sad that he's not here. I'm just like this really boring. I'm kind of like a Knicks summer signee.
Well,
I'm just
like
around.
Yeah, you're the Taj Gibson. Like, yeah, you're here. You're a seasoned, salted veteran. You're going to hit some mid-range shots. You know, you're going to elbow someone in the face. You're going to teach these young guys how to pod.
Forever Clarence Weatherspoon. Eternal Clarence Weatherspoon.
And you're often compared to Keith Van Horn.
Oh, that's high praise. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, yeah, this is Cookies Hoops. And it's a special episode of Cookies Hoops because it's the week of the Cookies Hoops Inaugural Classic.
Oh, it's exciting. Those are electric words, man. We've been working frantically on this with help from our good buddies.
All of our friends.
We have left no stone unturned.
You know, the streets are chirping.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? When you go outside, there's a palpable energy that's emanating from 100 Dobbin Street, where the Cookies Classic will be held this Saturday at 2 p.m. with two different tournaments, a men's and a women's bracket, with some of our favorite people from some great organizations. And those include Vice, GQ, The New Yorker, Lucien,
4510,
The Dance NYC,
A-Life.
Are we just going back and forth like the locks on this?
Oh no, we were in the cipher. That's awful, man. Get some auto-tune in here. Let's break it up.
4510, Kalina Strada. Got any other ones? Anyway, there's 24 organizations, each one equally as awesome and cool as the next, and we're really glad they're part of this. So, yeah, that's going to be going down on, again, October 19th, 2 p.m. at 100 Dobbin Street, which is a new basketball facility called BK Post. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's sick. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce it to people because we're psyched when we saw the whole premises and how it came together over the last few months. So to have Cookies as a way to introduce all these people that are friends of ours and the community and listeners to a new basketball venue is just a really cool opportunity. So come through.
Yeah, even if you don't like our takes, even if you don't like the intern's takes, and you don't like pizza, and you don't like good music, and
what about if you like beer?
ethical.
Should you come if you like beer?
Even if you hate beer, even if you hate ethical basketball, this place is so beautiful. I walked in, and it was hoops heaven. It was it was stunning, man.
I got there a few minutes after you and almost wiped out on the slick of salty tears that you had left like a slug with its trail as you entered the facility and walked towards half court.
It was incredible. I've always imagined it. So, growing up, I had a 3 goals that were very modest goals. One of them to get a cat. I have had many cats. Done. A TV in my bedroom, which I had at one point. I no longer have, but that was awesome. I finally was old enough where I could put a TV and go to sleep watching Conan O'Brien. That was cool. And then the third was to have a hoop in my studio. which never happened. But this is how I imagined it as like a 15-year-old kid watching the Check Your Head VHS as they shoot hoops while recording that album. And this place it felt like that. It felt like every kid's dream.
Well, your goals you're extremely lofty, and I'm glad that you accomplished, I don't know, like 1.5 of 3. Like you're shooting 50%. That's like better than Zach LaVine from midrange.
It's better than Trae Young from 3, man. That's all I'm saying.
50%. That's elite.
Yeah. But this is something we've wanted to do and we're trying to do more of, which is more IRL stuff. More later on this year, we're going to have more events going on. But this is we've put a lot into this, and this is what we really care about. And we're going to try to do this every year. All proceeds are going to go to charity. And we just want all of our friends around to celebrate basketball before the season starts.
Yeah, and the charity is called Peace Players. They have a branch in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And the goal of the organization, which is international, and they have chapters in the Middle East and South Africa, all around the globe, is to bring people together via the game of basketball. So, like, we're doing that here in the war-torn streets of Greenpoint, Brooklyn.
That's right. And it's fortunately not as controversial as the stuff going on in the NBA currently.
Next stop, Kurdistan.
Ooh. Hey, that's tough.
But yes, it's open to the public. Come through, have some drinks, eat some food, watch some hoops. We're going to have some exclusive merch drops. So
just one.
That might be appealing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the interns will be locked up with Les Gruel, so you cannot throw stones at them for all their correct takes on Twitter. They will not be there.
They are mostly behind the scenes for good reason. They're extremely ugly.
Yeah, and they're locked in a cage.
And
with
the cage,
Wi-Fi.
the cage element as well is the hideousness and aversion to daylight, which is probably our fault.
Yeah, it's like a paradox. They have high-speed Wi-Fi and laptops, but they're locked in a cage.
It's interesting what a diet of less gruel will do to the nervous system. It really makes people respond in very interesting ways.
Yeah, they perform better almost. It's as if getting more sleep is the same as getting less gruel.
It's really a scientific phenomenon, and we're happy to share it with folks, but just not this Saturday.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, the Cookies Classic, Saturday, October 19th at BK Post, which is at 100 Dobbin Street in Greenpoint, New York. Games will start roughly at 2 p.m. We're going to go for a few hours until we have crowned some champions in both the men's and women's divisions. So yes, come through, bring your friends, blah, blah, blah.
We'll be there.
Moving along to less important news.
Everything's less important.
The NBA.
No.
We're almost there, dude.
It happened really fast. It was like you're broke forever. No, you're poor forever, broke overnight.
It did happen fast. I feel like in prior years there's been an easing into the NBA season, but it seems like we've accelerated the preseason a little bit. This whole China fiasco kind of overwhelmed the actual games on the floor, and we're about to start next week. Like, it's go time, man.
It is go time. The 29 NBA teams are ready to fight for that championship, and the Knicks already are crowned the champions of relegation. It's a beautiful thing.
Anything you've noticed or anything you want to talk about that's happened in preseason? Because none of this will matter in a week. No one will give a fuck about preseason in a week. So it's a good time to get a preseason takeout. What have you seen that's interesting you, Andrew Kuo?
We should support our troops and the heroes of Miami. Tyler Herro looks like one of those players that's going to have a ton of gravity, which is like just a dude we're excited about and kind of check in on box score wise. And every time he checks in, we're going to see if he can light it up. He looks like he can score, man. And he was an odd pick. A lot of people thought he was a bit of a reach, but he looks really fun.
So thus far in the preseason, and granted, we're talking about small amounts of minutes, like the equivalent of like a game in the NBA. So it's really, really meaningless, but it's still cool to look at. So Herro has been averaging 33.7 points per 36 minutes, which is pouring it in. Again, tiny sample size, and it's wildly adjusted because he dropped 4 3-pointers in like 4 minutes last night, or something along those lines. He just he just ripped off a bunch of threes, and everyone went crazy, and he was trending on Twitter. And in my mind, he's immediately the most overrated player out of that draft. Like within literally 12 minutes of game time, his overrated rating went through the roof.
Over RJ Barrett, your boy? It's pretty overrated.
I mean, I don't know if he's overrated. I don't know how people view RJ Barrett.
Well, hopefully he looks pretty good, and I want him to be passing more. And eventually, if he ever gets to play in the NBA, I think he's going to be good. We talked about this last week. He's going to be a fine 3 pick. I'm looking at the list now. Harrow at number 13 to Miami was surprising because Doumbia was on the board. I think I'm saying that right. But also this guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I thought, according to the KBB, was a middle lottery pick. I really liked him. But, hey, man, Harrell looks good, and I think Miami fans being excited, they're not going to win anything, especially with Jimmy Butler looking at early retirement.
Jimmy Butler is over there, sifting through his Roth IRA, riding around in a golf cart, sipping Mai Tais in Boca.
Hanging out with Uncle Leo with astronaut pens.
So you need something. You need Tyler Harrow. Everyone needs a Harrow.
That team is so weird. Bam Adebayo, is he going to be real? People are talking about him as if he was a top 50 player, but I don't know, man. I don't know what Pat Riley's going to do.
I kind of like Miami, and they're not built to win a title. I don't know that there's a foreseeable path to that. They're just kind of set up to be a kind of mean-spirited team that might be able to beat you on any given night and might win a couple rounds in the playoffs tops, and they're kind of content with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they don't believe that they can win a title, but I look at that team and I'm saying, oh, all right, you don't have the talent to be an elite team, most likely, but you're a pain in the ass team, and there's something to be said for embracing the role as a elbow-throwing pain in the ass team.
Yeah, and the specter of CP3 kind of looms over a couple of these organizations, and Miami's one of them. If they somehow find a way to get him on the team without giving up too much, the team kind of changes. CP3 is still really excellent, and I don't know if Pat Riley feels that is to win now moment for him, but judging by the way he danced on that yacht, it might be.
When I look at teams who are satisfied with being okay, I'm not mad if you're at that status and you say, we're not going to blow it up. I think the teams to be skeptical of are the ones who are aiming to be a middle-of-the-pack team. And that's sort of the end result. With Miami, they just signed Jimmy Butler. If they could turn a few of these young guys into assets, they can trade for another star and all of a sudden be sort of in business. Like they're in the game. And I think that's what Miami is just trying to do this entire time. It's like stay in the game, stay competitive, throw pieces around. You're an attractive free agent destination. You just got Jimmy Butler, who is a top 15 or top 20 player in the league, if he wasn't, wearing a white suit and smoking Cuban cigars outside
Early
of
bird special.
Eating platanos at Versailles. If he wasn't doing that, you've got yourself a star.
Yeah.
You might have some good young players.
Do you believe in the idea of addition by subtraction? How do you view the Hassan Whiteside move to Portland? Does that idea exist? No sin bin, but, Philly Sixers fans always talk about Bryce Harper in baseball, and, he left the Nats and to join the Phillies. They missed the playoffs, and the Nats might be in the World Series. Is there such thing as addition by subtraction ever? I think of J.J. Redick immediately.
I think the NBA's prime example of that was, or at least was understood to be, Rudy Gay. And he was on Memphis, and he left, and they became better. He was on Toronto, they got rid of him, and they became better. He was on Sacramento, and they got rid of him. They became better.
Was there a correlation other than that?
Well, Right. Like Rudy Gay sort of got the reputation for being a bad player. And he isn't that bad of a player. He's not a great passer. He didn't have a great shot chart. There were a lot of things to be skeptical of him. But I feel like if you go back and look, like Rudy Gay probably wasn't the main problem. He just got paid too much.
Yeah, it's always about that. And with JJ Redick's example in Philly, I think he just got too much of the wrong kind of credit. He just was what he was, and he hurt the teams in equal ways in which he helped them. But I think of someone like Hassan Whiteside, who seems to be a very difficult player to coach and maybe even a difficult player to play with, but still pretty good. He's overpaid, but you understand why Riley paid him.
I mean, look, Rudy Gay was very inefficient for a bunch of seasons and was a high volume player, and swapping him out and those possessions for better options did make those teams better. And he's not a great defender, but he wasn't terrible. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would like to be a Rudy Gay apologist here a bit, because we have turned him in some ways into a punchline for the kind of player who is literally what you were talking about.
Well, DeMar DeRozan gets that too. And he's the same type of
they're very similar players.
Yeah, I don't think addition by subtraction actually exists. Like the Ewing theory doesn't work, and that's the most extreme way to talk about it. But I do like.
Wait. What do you mean it doesn't exist? How does that work? If you have a bad player and you get rid of him and you give his shots and his minutes to a better player, isn't that addition by subtraction? Isn't that like the definition of it?
I don't necessarily think the Ewing theory works in you can't really prove it, but it's a really tasty idea. If you just have a good player waiting, you just have a good player. That's not because the better player went down or he's holding the spot. You just have the better player there.
Okay. But I think Ewing theory and addition by subtraction are two different things. When you go back to JJ Redick and you say,
"Are you sure?"
I'm not sure, because it depends on the player. But the Ewing theory is that if you lose a star, the other guys pick up the slack to become a better team based on expanded roles. Yeah, usage, expanded roles, new sense of responsibility, and not perhaps like standing around and waiting for like Melo to do his thing. Instead, other guys get a chance to play as a team. But there's a few ways you could view the theory of the Ewing theory.
Yeah.
But addition by subtraction, that just depends on the guy, because the Ewing theory is about stars. It's not about role players.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But Hassan Whiteside is a star, and he's probably their best player as of last year before Jimmy Butler. And there's times when players have been hurt or traded where the team just loses and starts tanking. And that would just prove that the Ewing theory kind of doesn't work all the time, or addition by subtraction doesn't work all the time. When players get hurt or leave and the team gets worse, they just get worse.
I don't know what to think about Whiteside. I don't have any hard and like concrete feelings about him as a player. We know he can rebound. We know he can block shots. He can score efficiently, around the basket. I'm not a big body language guy, but he does have like a cloud of surliness around him.
For sure.
That seems to kind of drag everybody on Miami down. And that's a completely theoretical and vibist critique. But I still never look at him on the court and be like, oh, damn, Whiteside's in. Like, look out. It's like, who fucking cares? Whiteside came in. Yeah, he'll get some rebounds. He'll commit a dumb foul. He'll turn the ball over. He'll take a dumb jumper. I just don't care about Whiteside being on the court.
Last year, he had a 3 defensive box plus minus and a 23 per. His overall box plus minus is very pedestrian. It was 0.8 last year because offensively he wasn't good. So, yeah, you may have a point there. He can dominate at times, but usually it all kind of balances out, and he's he's just a replacement player at this point, and he was traded for the parts of his sum, right? Both contractually and statistically.
According to PIPM,
Good
Whiteside
stat.
was pretty good last year.
What
He
does
had
it
a
give?
PIPM of 2.3, which is like,
Oh, that's nice.
It's not a star, but that's a good player. So maybe he does get a bad rap because he does seem like he's sulking all the time, and because he does commit dumb fouls, and he does have an awful assist to turnover ratio. I mean, he's one of the worst passers in the NBA. He'll also like bail the defense out by just taking like 15 footers every now and then for no real reason.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Whiteside might be a guy that's a little bit like Rudy Gay, a guy who was propped up to be a star, maybe wasn't one, but was still pretty good, but will now be viewed as a reason that Miami has improved because they got rid of this guy who was sort of like a magnet for criticism and for vibes about why the team was underperforming.
Yeah, and I'm surprised how long we've been talking about the Miami Heat, but
I know, it's just awful, and I apologize. Like,
no, but hey, man, they're one of the 29 teams in the NBA, so we have to get to the bottom of this.
no, every one of the 29 teams deserves at least a discussion. We don't talk about Miami that much, other than Jimmy Butler deciding he's going to spend the rest of his days
His golden
in a
years.
cigarette boat, jumping out, riding a Testarossa to the Florida room, and, you know, hanging out with DJ Khaled. I mean, look, he's got a rich and fulfilling time in the Crescent City.
Man,
Is that New Orleans? What's the Crescent City? Is that Miami?
I don't know, but I want it to be New Orleans because of croissants.
I mean, that's a good theory. It's New Orleans. New Orleans is the Crescent City.
Is it because of the tasty French treat, the croissant?
I mean, sure.
Jimmy
Let's say
Butler.
yes.
Can't you see Jimmy Butler in a sleeveless button-down denim shirt wrestling an alligator? You know what I'm thinking? I'm just thinking of Street Fighter. My bad. I'm thinking of Guile. You know, the guy with the flat top hair.
Oh yeah, who throws the
Sonic
not the
Boom.
Sonic Boom. It's not the Shoryuken, right?
Yeah, he's the Keith Van Horn of Street Fighter.
We've definitely spoken for far too long about the Miami Heat. And again, we deeply apologize, but the 29 teams are the 29 teams.
And Tyler Herro is a fun player, so it brings them some sort of oomph, which is fantastic because you can't even predict that.
Well, moving along.
Okay.
The NBA's nonsensical China situation continues apace. I thought we might get out of it after one news cycle, and then it drifted into two. I feel like we're in news cycle 3. And yesterday, LeBron James reinvigorated it anew by jumping in and saying that Rockets general manager Daryl Morey was uninformed when he spoke about it.
Uneducated.
Then he tried to sort of tweet his way through it and kind of say that, well, it was the timing that was the problem because they were in China and it created, you know, a negative atmosphere about that. And then he kind of tried to explain that, and it kind of went off the rails. Ultimately, LeBron is now looking like someone who's defending China, defending the NBA's relationship with China, and as someone who has been outspoken about equality and justice, that's a thorny position to be in when people are now accusing you of siding with autocracy.
I mean, yeah, you move pretty fast through that stuff. I think he gave an interview where he talked about, he unfortunately used words like uneducated and uninformed, I believe, to describe Morey, which people really latched onto. But his overall quote, in my opinion, was pretty reasonable. He was saying that if you're going to drop a bomb like that while NBA players are in China, maybe give us a few days, maybe give us a heads up. We're there. We don't necessarily feel as safe as we could. We're sitting ducks over there, and we're at the mercy of a pretty unpredictable regime. And he was, I think, basically saying that he was frustrated because he had not only been framed as like a crossing the union line or like a scab hired to replace a union member. I think he was saying that, couldn't you wait a week before you drop that? Before we came home or after we came home?
Which is reasonable because they were over there. Yeah. They were Americans in this industry that work for the same overall structure that Daryl Morey does. And to a degree, he did put guys that are his professional contemporaries and colleagues into a situation that could potentially have been dangerous, or at least it was awkward, and it made their trip less enjoyable and potentially fractious.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's a wrong thing to say. On the other hand, he could have said nothing.
Yes. I mean, of course, players of his stature and celebrities of his stature are always asked over and over, and then they finally break, and they always say something that they could regret. I think
this whole thing is a trap. There's no good answer.
It is definitely a trap, and you know it's a trap when everyone's just accusing each other of not knowing what they're talking about, but never quite explaining, except Joseph Tsai, who does a lot of business in China. Everyone else is just like, but you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, does anybody know what they're talking about?
I cannot wait until everyone is fully informed on this topic and then can really, really, elaborate on what the proper perspective should be. Because right now everyone's just boning up on their history about China and Taiwan and Hong Kong, and soon everyone's going to be so steeped in the lore and history of that part of the globe that we'll have incredible takes coming out of the NBA from guys like LeBron and Steve Kerr and everyone else.
Wikipedia is going to be on fire for the next 18 hours, and then on the 19th hour, we're going to get everyone's real opinion about this conflict.
I love that Kyrie's said he's going to get informed. I'm like, hell yeah.
I love it. He's like, does Hong Kong even exist, man? I'm like,
It's like, oh no, don't do this. He's like, does China exist? Like, okay, where are you going with this?
Is this just a place in our mind? I'm like,
What side of the planet are they on, Kyrie?
Does land belong to anybody, Kyrie?
I wish you would come back with that take. Land ownership is theft. Oh, okay. I mean,
yeah.
He ended it in a good place, I guess.
And Inez Cantor kind of clapped back at LeBron because Inez has been
But did Inez come out and say anything about China?
No. I mean...
See, everybody's just on some bullshit here.
Dude.
No, there's no good answer.
Because China is terrifying and money is so real. When it affects your bottom line like that, it's really tough. And there's a number of things. First, I always think of the conversation we always have here is it's hard to be the totality of everybody's desires. And LeBron James his opinions of Hong Kong aligning with mine is nothing I really thought to expect from him. I really don't care what he thinks about Hong Kong. He's so many other things to me.
I don't think he has any concrete opinion on Hong Kong. I don't think most Americans do. I don't have any this is what I believe about Hong Kong. I don't have deep emotions tied to that situation. If I went through and studied up like Steve Kerr is doing right now, I could arrive at some conclusions, but I don't care about it in the way that I care about things going on in America. And I feel like that's what we've seen happen in the aftermath of LeBron's sort of awkward injection in this conversation, was that people who don't like the NBA and don't like LeBron and don't like black people have reveled in this moment because they can criticize LeBron, who has been an outspoken advocate for equality and justice and called the president a bum. They can attack him for not attacking Asians. It's like the perfect right-wing attack angle. You're going after a black dude for not being critical of Asians. What a gift.
it's so confusing, and everyone's trying to get fired up about something, and it all kind of ends up with the snake eating its own tail, like right away. It's like, well, the NBA is canceled because they backed a socialist regime that commits crimes, except Daryl Morey's a general manager in the NBA, and he was pro-democracy, and that's where the conflict started. It just ends up nowhere. It's a big snafu, man.
And if you're LeBron James, as you said, he's not super familiar with this situation. He doesn't have deep emotional responsibility to explain his viewpoints on this or to even be incredibly informed. At the same time, there's directives coming down from the NBA, like, do not say shit about China right now. This could affect the salary cap. Your fellow players and your friends who are agents could lose 15% of the overall money that's flowing around the league right now if you talk too much shit right now. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't want to hurt our league. I don't want to hurt fellow players. I don't want to be the one who's like Daryl Morey to get singled out as maybe would get praise for speaking truth to power, but for creating an international incident that can take 15% out of this huge business that you are a huge part of. Like, that is an electrical fence that you have no interest in peeing on.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot at stake, and no one really knows the cause or effect of all of these statements and all these tweets. And I think everyone's kind of looking around to get some sort of, to have someone kind of lead the way that isn't maybe Daryl Morey. And, Silver.
Also, this is a Silver problem. This, if I'm LeBron, I'm like, ask Adam Silver.
Yes.
This is a Adam Silver who is ultimately our boss with his clients. If someone says to you when you work for a company, what do you think about your boss's relationship with this client? You're like, I have nothing to say about that.
And Adam Silver has proved himself to be the master risk assessment guy, right? Because when all that stuff went down in the Los Angeles Clippers organization, he threw down that lifetime ban because he assessed the risk. He understood that he read the room well, and he understood what he was doing was maybe not constitutional, but the right thing to do. And he was like, come at me. I will fight for this stance. And that's kind of what he did. I say unconstitutional because it's hard to take away someone's business like that without, you can't just take away someone's business because they're the worst. They own the business. But, it's a private company.
You can, though.
Yeah, it's a private company. Yeah.
There are those situations. And look, if LeBron said, here is my take. China is bad. Free Hong Kong. Peace out. Mic drop.
Yeah.
That would have been fine. But I also don't think he has the responsibility to say, okay, I'm going to take a hard stand here that's going to impact like the entire news cycle, that's going to impact a whole bunch of players, my own company, Nike, the NBA, just because I'm being put on the spot with a microphone on my face. I don't think it's fair that people have to speak out. I think he should have just been a little more cautious and a little more like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to comment on that. That's a Adam Silver and the NBA and China and Daryl Morey story. That's not a LeBron James story.
Yeah. And I've trained myself through the last 3.5 years not to care about these things because, when you put a microphone in front of LeBron James's face, he's going to puff out his chest a little bit because this is what he does. Asked about Taco Tuesday, he's going to be like, well, it's the best day of all the week. It's like, well, you didn't have to go that far, but yeah, it's pretty cool. And
he's like, Taco Mondays are terrible. Taco Wednesdays are okay. Taco Thursdays are good. I can't front. Taco Thursdays are really good. But
Tuesday. But we're all trained to act a certain way, and LeBron James usually gets, recently has been congratulated for taking his stands, and I think he missed on this one, but I just don't pay attention to it. Or I'll take that back. I pay a lot of attention to it. I just don't get fired up about it. And he maybe overspoke, but whatever. He overspoke. That's fine.
I'm not defending LeBron's position particularly, other than to say he's not required to take the stand that we want him to take and to be the flag bearer for morality in this particular case, because this is not a situation in which his heart and his brain and his identity are tied into being a standard bearer.
You mean his silence over Libya's deafening? Like, we're just
exactly.
asking,
And I feel like we do ask, especially I feel like it falls to black entertainers and black athletes. We don't do it about white athletes and entertainers as much. Oh, where's your take on this? Like, it happens all the time. Well, where's Jay-Z on this? I don't know. Where's fucking Justin Timberlake?
Right. And it's because Justin Timberlake is gone. I was thinking about him the other day. Like,
the man of the woods?
Yeah. But it's because I think we look to people of color because they can usually offer a nuance that's useful in a soundbite or as some sort of guiding principle because they are coming from a place. And I'd much rather hear LeBron James's opinion about this than Keith Van Horn. And
at the same time, though, I do think there's an inclination to ask people who are in minority groups to speak on behalf of that group in a way that we never expect white people to do. It's like, oh, you're Muslim? Well, it's time for you to renounce terrorism. Like,
yeah.
Okay, why haven't white people been renouncing, every terrorist attack in America over like the last 5 years that involves someone with anti-immigrant sentiment or white supremacists? Like, white people aren't just asked to renounce those things.
Yeah, and I've talked about this in regards to my day job, and occasionally, not that frequently, I'll be asked why my work isn't more Asian, overtly. And my answer is always, I am Asian, so it's all overtly Asian. But no, I never go up to a white painter and ask them why their work isn't about being white. They get to talk about history and abstraction and all these fun ideas, but I have to talk about my identity.
Exactly. And that's part of this, I think, is that when we say, oh, this thing happened that affected black people, like, where's Jay-Z? It's like, well, where's everybody? Where is Tyler Harrow in this? I didn't hear anything from Harrow.
Where's Kobe Bryant on this? Can we get a Kobe take on this?
Kobe is getting some tough press these days.
Yeah, he's not had a good post-NBA life.
So after being viewed as a savant who could help younger players reach their inner Mamba and withdraw that snake energy, that powerful snake spirit that turns you into a competitor who wants it more than your contemporaries. Look, the Boston Celtics young journeyman, Jayson Tatum, has been undergoing a de-Kobification procedure.
Which he denies, but we all know what's going on. He's mincing his words a bit, but he's currently trying to de-Kobify his game.
So what does that mean, Andrew Kuo? What is a de-Kobification? What is that? What are you trying to exorcise from your serpentine spirit?
On the surface, less terrible fadeaway 15-foot shots, less possessions where you pound the rock and you let every person on the court, the other 9 people, know that you want it more. But also it's kind of a spiritual decobization of his whole mentality, because I don't think the Mamba mentality ends when the game is over. I think it's some sort of weird sociopathic focus on winning that Kobe probably tells all the players in this camp. Like, you just have to win like me and Michael Jordan did, and just standing next to the most popular guy in the room, right? And I think a lot of these players are like, right, if I think like a champion, I will become a champion, and they realize it's just bricking shots.
Is the Dober Mamba the mask that eats into your face?
Yes.
Agreed. The real winner here, the guy like loving this, Drew Hanlon.
Oh man.
He's been fucking people up for 2 years, doing nothing but Kobe style like spin mid-range post moves and like little Euro step fadeaways. And everyone's like, it was Kobe that did it. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm just fixing Markelle Fultz over here. Don't mind me.
Kobe,
Hanlon,
you son of a gun. How dare you.
Hanlon is loving this. He is enjoying laying his eyeballs upon it.
He blocked you on Twitter, didn't he?
He blocked the interns. He didn't block me.
Oh, the interns.
I don't know what the interns did to him, and if they did anything unprofessional, I apologize on behalf of the interns. But Drew Hanlon did indeed block the interns.
That's interesting.
I would never say anything bad about him, obviously.
Don't you feel like there's a bubbling up of something where it's like the Empire Strikes Back? Because this week we heard, I'm forgetting his name, talking about mid-range and how we've gone too far into analytics and we have to come back to where I'd rather make a shot than walk away with. I'd rather make a bad mid-range shot, quote unquote, than walk away with 0 points. Who am I talking about?
Well, it sounds like you're talking about Zach LaVine.
I am. Whew.
Is it Zach LaVine or Zach LaVine?
I think it's LaVine.
Okay, we'll go with
LaVine
that.
is fantastic too, man.
Yeah, I like both of them. I'll say LaVine.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was in an interview and he expressed sort of a skepticism towards the league's infatuation with layups and three-pointers, and he more or less said, yeah, but if you get an open look, it's better to take that than to keep working to get a worse shot later on, or to like find your teammates to take a contested three. You might as well take an open two. And this, of course, naturally devolved into the eye test army versus the stat nerd brigade. I mean, it was tailor fit for that sort of trench warfare. And it ended up with KD jumping in and defending players and defending mid-range jumpers, and people then saying, or at least claiming, that 3 is worth more than 2. Where do you stand on this? Are you an eye test guy? Are you a metrics nerd? Like, where are you?
I'm probably 70-30 metrics eye test, maybe 80-20, but it's the job of the player to think what LaVine thinks. I want every player to think that they're good no matter what. It's like, oh, you want me to... I mean, he shot well from 3 last year. 374 is fine. I'm happy.
And LaVine was awful from mid-range. Just terrible.
Yeah, he's a bricklayer. But I want my players to think that they have no weaknesses. And it's up to general management and coaching and ownership to kind of put the right players on the floor and to create opportunities for them not to do exactly what they want to do. But LaVine isn't... I'm not mad at LaVine for saying that. Of course these jocks hate nerds. I'm fine with that. Like, that's as old as time. But I think...
And it's ethical.
And it's ethical, right. And LaVine, he could just dunk forever and I'd be happy. And the Chicago Bulls, the post-Jordan era has been really tough because I think they owe LaVine $19 million for the next 2 or 3 years. And he's a volume guy. He's going to have some SportsCenter highlight dunks, but you don't really want to hear that.
I fuck with LaVine. I think he's good.
He's fine.
I think he's good.
A lot of turnovers, man.
He turns it over a lot. Not a strong defender. It's a good offensive player. He can score. He can shoot from deep. He's efficient. I like him.
I only don't like him because his 5 seasons he's played 77, 82, shout out, 47, 24, and 63 games. I don't know. I'm just weary of the whole package there.
Viable concern. But I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he expressed a really similar sentiment where he said that it's not a bad shot if it goes in. And of course, we can sort of scoff at that, but it does indicate that this is a talking point that he's had for a few years, where when people ask him about analytics, because he does take some bad mid-range jumpers, although he doesn't even take that many. He's not like Mr. Mid-range. He kind of gets accused of that, and he does take too many long twos. I will say he does. But it's not overwhelming. He's not like a mid-range guy necessarily. Takes quite a few threes. He gets to the basket a decent amount. But he's just sort of established, like, here's my orthodoxy, and this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that, like, I think you should take open shots. And you can't castigate an NBA player because if you're out there and you're presented with an open two, you can't sit there and say in your mind, oh man, I should not be taking this. You want guys to do what comes naturally and be coached and positioned to take the shots that you want as an organization and as a system.
Yeah, it's not a choice, it's a skill. Ben Simmons not taking that shot is a skill. He's not taking that shot because he's trying to be difficult. He recognizes value elsewhere in his game. In his case, dunks. And that is a skill. So we talk about it as if someone could change their actions on the floor based off of a decision, and it's more complicated than that.
And it's also the coach's job and the GM's job to say, all right, if Zach LaVine has a penchant for taking contested twos, how do we make him stop? Other than saying, here are the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a way to do that? Because when he goes up into that shot, he's probably not thinking this is a contested two. It just ends up a contested two. He starts making a move. He thinks he has space. He picks up his dribble. He goes up and someone's closing out on him. And all of a sudden it's a tougher shot than he thought.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out a way to put him in positions where he doesn't shift into that gear, which makes him like pick up his dribble 15 feet from the basket and like start looking for a shot.
And an example I always think about that idea is Isaiah Thomas's MVP run in Boston, where they were basically setting 3 picks to get him open to take a valuable shot from the corner, and they turned him into a face valuable player. But as we found out, it was manufactured by the coaching staff and didn't really quite reflect the skills of this one guy, and it was kind of a sleight of hand.
And we know it depends on the player too, because you can take someone who took a lot of mid-range jumpers if they play off the ball and they're a low usage guy and just stick them in the corner. Like, you take threes from the spot on the floor. You run to that spot on the floor. When you catch the ball, you shoot it. But it's trickier with someone like LaVine who's on the ball. If you wanted him to take less of these, you'd have to adjust his role. And maybe that's the situation in Chicago. But again, he's not even that inefficient. So while it's true that he should not take those kind of shots, it's not killing his overall numbers. He's just adding in too many lousy ones where he could be even better as a scorer.
If DeAndre Jordan could have hit threes in LA, he would have been a Hall of Famer. If Zach LaVine recognizes market inefficiency in his shot chart, he turns into an all-star. All these players have weaknesses, and not everybody, like we said last week, has a mini LeBron James in their body that they can summon if they just like read a stat sheet.
And this is a form or function issue. When we looked at the Oklahoma City Thunder, when they had all these wonderful players, 3 MVP candidates on the same team, and their shot charts were different. KD's had a lot of mid-range jumpers. He had pull-ups. He had ISO plays. Westbrook, we know what his shot chart looks like. And then you had James Harden, who has this gorgeous modern system in which you've got foul shots, dunks, layups, and then 3-pointers. They all played in the same system under the same coach. They were developed by the same team, and they ended up different players. That's just also who you are. You can't make Evan Turner into James Harden. They're different players. He needs to take mid-range jumpers because he can't shoot threes and he can't finish at the rim. Like it's who the guys are. So to say, Zach LaVine, you should be more like James Harden, that's true, but he isn't James Harden.
You're definitely right. And this is the Ben Simmons debate we always have, and this is the range versus 10,000 hours debate we always have. It's the opposing ideas of do what you're best at and then also add an extra skill. And I think that line, when you cross that, either makes you a star, a superstar, a max player, or some guy struggling with potential.
Right. You're Ben Simmons. You know how you'd be much better if you were bad at something.
Yeah, right.
And it's funny because, he makes 1 3-pointer and everyone's like, yeah, he can shoot threes now. Of course he can't.
No.
Of course he can't. And he's not going to take a lot of threes. So then he's turning down 3-pointers in the next game and boomers are going crazy again. Meanwhile, Zion can't shoot threes at all and Giannis can't shoot threes at all. I am, again, completely confounded by why Ben Simmons is held to different standards than Zion or Giannis. It just does not make any sense. The obsession over Simmons' 3-pointer is bullshit, and it does not have to do with basketball.
And before we get too far into this thing we always do, I think let's switch it into, I love the Philly fans.
Yeah. We no need to rehash this. We went in like half an hour at least last week on this exact topic. I'm just saying the boomers are at it again.
And then we're definitely going to talk more about this season, but I think it's the type. Every city has a type of fan, and I think the type of fan in Philly, how they identify themselves, and we love them, but that is kind of their personality to talk about players like Noah Simbin, Bryce Harper, and Carson Wentz and Ben Simmons in this regard, and kind of gloss over JJ Redick, who was more problematic than anybody on the court.
And this goes back to the eye test versus the stat test. And Tyler Herro or JJ Redick or Kevin Durant, these guys who are really good shooters, and you see them make good shots, and you see them get on hot streaks. And Klay Thompson, your favorite player in the NBA, could be in this category as well.
He's good.
And what we might call it is shooting bias. It may have been discussed on Cookies Hoops podcast in the past.
Sounds familiar.
But it is what we're talking about, where these guys like LaVine and Durant are like, I'm a shooter. I can make all these shots. You can't tell me not to take these shots. And they're right, because like this is their job. They are scorers. They are shooters. They don't need to approach the game like Ben Simmons does, because Ben Simmons has a totally different way of scoring than they do. Ben Simmons scores like Enes Kanter or Steven Adams. He has to approach the game the same way they do. But Kevin Durant doesn't. Kevin Durant, as he was saying, on Twitter today in this conversation about numbers versus shooting in mid-range, that, I wanted to see my first 3 shots go in. I'm just trying to make my first 3 shots. I don't even know what that means.
Right.
But to him, that's an important idea, that he's going out there and he's going to try to make his first 3 shots. So mid-range are part of that. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be Kevin Durant. All I can say is whatever he's doing, it seems to work for him.
That was such a 90s announcer thing. When a player was cold from the field and they got fouled and they would say like, he just needs to see the ball go in the basket. I'm like, I'm not sure what that means. Sure, that extra free throw is definitely good for him, but I don't know if it's going to light a fire under him or make him want it more,
I don't even disagree with it that much.
No, we all know what it means. Like, we all know what getting hot means.
But you miss like 4 shots and you start feeling a little self-conscious about missing another of the same kind of shot. So if you get a layup, you're like, okay, I'm off the schneid. Schneid? That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's a schneid. That's a schneid comment.
I'm off the.
You're right.
But yeah, that idea of like, all right, there we go, got one. Now I'm not on the verge of going 0 for 10. Like there is some truth to that. Like it's a little bit of a confidence builder, but really it's sparing yourself the mortification of like an epic shooting failure. Getting a couple layups in the mix, you just know your numbers are starting to look a little better.
Yeah, and this is my 20% eye test thing. I think I love, as we know, and I can't really figure this out, but I love placebos. And I think even 4 players on the floor, seeing a player, a teammate get hot influences the outcomes. And this, I could be entirely making this up because we've heard players say both things. When they see a player dominating, they feel like they have more space and they can hit more shots because the attention they get. Or like Richard Jefferson when he played with LeBron, who said he was paralyzed. And there's both ways to see it, but I think the idea of animals, of all different, like dogs and cats and everything that, like for example, cephalopods and squid. One squid in a tank could look at another squid solving a puzzle and then turn to its puzzle and solve it just by watching another squid do it. And I think that's a really powerful idea in life, but also on the basketball court, to see people execute things succinctly and successfully, I think influences the way you move and the steps you take and the shots you take.
Even playing pickup ball on a shit level, when you've got someone on your team or a couple players on your team who are ball hogs and chucking it, it does have a trickle down effect where when you get the ball, you actually want to go do something with it versus giving it back to them because you just want to be active. You want to participate in the same way that when the ball is really whipping and popping and everyone's unselfish and just like seeking out open men to get better shots, it does feel like it's conducive. And these are not things that I can look at and say, here is how it's based on facts or here is how it's based on metrics. But we can look at the NBA and say that there are certain teams that pass more than other teams. And is that a product of personnel? Sure. But it might be a product of system, personnel, and that sort of echo effect of what you're saying, the squid in the tank. Mm-hmm. When Golden State, when they were really ripping it before Durant came there, who is more of an ISO player, even though he did become a better passer in Golden State, when that ball would just be flicking around the perimeter effortlessly, and they'd end up with these incredible ball movement possessions that would end with Steph Curry splashing an open three after the defense had futilely chased him around like with 7 different defenders. And you'd say like, oh, this is basketball. This is beautiful. And that's not how they looked when KD was there, despite the fact that when KD was there, they might have been a better team.
And
it's a lot of emotions involved in that kind of thing.
And this is where I get cold-hearted a little bit too, because maybe it's not emotion. Maybe they have confidence in their shooting. Maybe they know they're not getting the ball back from Durant, so they don't want to pass to him. Maybe someone sees Vince Carter dunk in one of his signature ways and say, I want to dunk. And in my cold-hearted mind, I'm like, that's a really valuable shot. You should take that. Or when they see Steph Curry draining it from half court, they're like, I'd like to try that too. I'm like, that's kind of a valuable shot if you take that as well. You know what I mean? So we can dissect it and we can be a little cynical about it, but it's hard to figure out where the idea comes and where it has already existed. Is it an origin story or is it influence?
And this is the same debate. It's stats and numbers versus the eye test and feelings and emotions, and these are all the same cyclic sort of argument where they all bleed into each other, and a lot of it is really hard to separate. When players who are, the jocks denigrate the nerds, there are not that many stat guys who are just about stats. That's not really a common thing. If you enjoy basketball enough to dig really deep into stats, you're probably someone who watches the game a lot too. This idea of people who just dive into metrics and stats without watching games doesn't hold water in my experience.
No, and my question is always, if an eye test person who doesn't like stats watches so much basketball, I always ask, at what point do you resist not taking a deeper dive into it? Like, if you were obsessed about one thing, whether it be, I don't know, pizza, tacos, movies, Netflix, Breaking Bad, and you didn't take a deeper dive into it and figured out what other shows has the director directed, what other roles has my favorite actor played, then what are you doing? So if you watch this much basketball but you don't glance at basketball reference, I'm always curious as to where that divide is. Is it just like a spiritual line that you won't cross? It's like, I will never look at it because it seems conducive to watch a game and try to frame it in more than 3 or 4 ways, right?
I agree. I'm always far more mystified by people who are hard body eye test guys, where I'm like, you're not intrigued enough to get into the numbers?
Yeah, man, it's fun.
Like, you can only watch so many games, dude. You
Yes.
can't watch every NBA game. You can't do it. You don't have the time.
Or let me
So-
rephrase it. There's not enough games. For me, 82 is not enough. I want more. So when there's no relegated Knicks game on, I'm just taking a deep dive into their stats of last game.
Oh, as a fan of a particular franchise. I'm just saying, sort of, as a fan of basketball.
No, I know. Yeah.
You can't put down 82 games by 30 teams every season. You just can't do
That's
it.
hard. Yeah.
So wouldn't you want to know what happened? And wouldn't that consequently lead you to look at statistics?
I don't understand where it begins and ends, because we're always comparing the number of rings, which is just a basic statistic. And we're always talking about points scored like Kobe. And that's very much a statistic.
Right? When people are like, oh yeah, LeBron's won like 3 rings and he's gone to the finals 8 times, whatever that is. I don't even care enough about rings to get the numbers right. It's like, oh, so 3 of 8 is something you can handle. You can deal with 3 of 8? Then you can understand true shooting percentage. You can understand any stat basically that's not a cumulative one, which aren't as valuable anyway. You can understand any rate statistic. You can do all this stuff. You just don't want to. It's like it's that fans who are only about the eye test don't want to know stats because they're lazy.
And you just want to hear about stuff that makes you sound, or that confirms like what you want to feel good. No one wants to feel wrong. So no one wants to talk about all the times Michael Jordan didn't make the finals. It's like, he's perfect in the finals. I'm like, ooh, he's far from perfect in the playoffs though. They're like, well, we don't care about that because the finals are the biggest moment. I'm like, I don't know. You don't really want to go out against the Knicks ever.
I mean, speaking of the Knicks, it's like the hashtag say Knicks for clicks. It's like the QAnon of basketball Twitter. It got hashtagged a few times when I criticized, the signing of Taj Gibson and letting the god Luke Cornett walk, in free agency. And it was like these people talking about how gritty and like seasoned as a veteran he is, and he can and Taj Gibson can work in the post and hit the mid range, and it was all like say Knicks for clicks. Like,
I don't get that.
It's like a weird, super angry subset of Knicks fans who think the media is out to criticize a 17-win team.
And I don't really say this because in a self-loathing way. I don't think Knicks fans are the greatest fan base. I actually think they're one of the worst fan bases because the team is so awful and they feel so entitled. I don't feel entitled to anything. I really like this team. I don't think it's a good team, but there's things to be interested in it.
The thing is, if your team is awful and has been awful, how do you not have a sense of humor about it? How would you not find it funny? How are you angry at those who criticize your awful team?
It takes time. I mean, being able to laugh at yourself sucks. And, like, it takes something to get through it. For me, it was Linsanity, where I cared so much about it. And when he was gone, I was like, oh, this thing is hilarious. It doesn't mean anything. So it was a relief to me. But it took me a long time because I used to think that caring about winning and losing was how to be a fan. But that's not the most fun way to do it. It's debatable, but I'm pretty happy with my Knicks fandom. Say Knicks for clicks, Ben.
I only say Knicks for clicks. That's how I, really add followers on Twitter. And I put these tweets up that are designed to enrage
Is it a bit?
Knicks fans. It's a bit. It's a huge bit. It's all a bit. One other interesting article, or maybe it's the only interesting article that we've discussed, maybe. Baxter Holmes, ESPN senior writer, wrote a story about sleep and how it is a large factor, a looming and undiscussed factor in the health and performance of players. And this went up on ESPN.com, and there's some interesting stuff in it. Basically, we've got this convergence of sort of the idea of wellness and technology with this traditional schedule of an NBA athlete in which they, quote, live like vampires. One quote here was that from a GM who used that exact word, which I scooped it from. He calls sleep what they're describing as the NBA's silent scourge of sleep deprivation, a pox on the bodies and minds of NBA athletes. The one NBA GM calls it a very big issue, and another says we have a large population of vampires as it is. Add in the travel, and it's more so. We all want better solutions to this. So everyone's basically saying this is a problem, sleep deprivation. I guess my question to you is, isn't sleep deprivation a problem for everyone?
Yeah, it's an American problem, definitely, because we joke about boomers, but literally it's the boomers are the ones who told us that we're supposed to be the first ones at work. And if we wake up early and kids should be at school early, and a lot of studies have proven we're just not getting enough sleep. And a lot of these kids don't perform well in schools because they're just waking up too early. They don't have to be in school for that long. We don't have to be working for this long. Shout out to Andrew Yang, who'll be debating tonight, has a thing on his platform where his campaign platform where he thinks maybe we should introduce a 3-day weekend in America. And this is all for health, if you want to live longer, healthier lives. And I think when you're sleep deprived, yeah, it affects everything. And this, about the NBA, this is the direction I thought metrics were going to go in its most useful form, is when people started doing really, really succinct analysis on diet, sleep, and exercise. And some of the...
Generally, you're speaking about biometrics overall.
Definitely. And
like quantifying how our bodies perform and how they react versus how they play basketball.
Yeah. And shout out to the logo, Allen Iverson, who's, as the years go by, has been proven right with his whole practice diatribe. And he wasn't even talking about working hard because he was the hardest worker in the history of basketball. But there's studies that have come out that say maybe players shouldn't shoot that much or jump that much because your knees are like shock absorbers and they don't regenerate. And if you have a problem with your knees, they just get worse and worse. You cannot make them better at any point. And sometimes shooting a lot of volume, a high volume of shots doesn't help you. For example, when DeAndre Jordan was struggling with his free throws, or Shaq, they would shoot longer than anybody, and it didn't necessarily help them at all.
Yeah, I would say that pro ball players are probably less sleep deprived now than they were in the past, due to a few different vectors there, which is they may party less and may go out to clubs less because you can meet potential partners on Instagram. I'm just speculating here. It could be all these things.
And it's all technological, right? The way you fly is so streamlined now.
Right. It's much easier to take flights. You're probably taking less bumpy bus rides. Your accommodations are more likely built for 6'6" to 7 foot men than they were 40 years ago, or whenever we're talking about before the NBA even existed, but basketball players were still forced to travel and go places. So sleep deprivation has probably been an enormous issue for basketball players forever. Maybe now it's being recognized, but it's probably also on the improvement anyway, or been improving anyway.
Yeah, and I think the first team that prioritizes all of this, and a lot of this, I think the root of sleep deprivation is, as you said, wellness. And I believe the NBA is requiring each team to have a psychiatrist that is employed by the organization. And I think that's a fantastic idea and something that has been long coming. But the team to really grasp the biometrics of sleep and performance will have an upper hand as soon as until everyone catches up to them.
So Tobias Harris is singled out in this article as being a complete sleep fetishist. No shaming, but he goes to bed at 8:30 on off days, and he finishes everything by 6 p.m. so he can make sure to get 9 hours of sleep. He also has a lot of technological doodads, like a heart rate monitor that he wears. He's let's see, he has some other stuff here. He travels with an electrocephalogram machine, examining his brain waves almost daily, engaging in 45-minute training sessions. He clips sensors into his ears, another into his temple. So he's just out here like Android RoboCoping it up.
And that's
not to be confused with a different Harris who is a cop. This is Tobias Harris, who is RoboCop.
Right. And that kind of borderlines like on a personality disorder. But as long as he thinks it works, like, we talk about placebo, and I'm not sure we have to go that far, but I'm glad someone is, because that's really interesting. But don't you think it's funny when you hear stories of young players who have been all-stars, who are on the cusp of big contracts or even in the middle of one, say simple things like, oh, I stopped eating Domino's pizza and I added 5 points to my game. Or I stopped playing Fortnite and I lost 5 pounds. Or Embiid, I started thinking positively and I lost 20 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, you can also look at someone like James Harden, who is not particularly skinny. He's not in bad shape by normal standards or anything like that, but he certainly does not look like a sculpted Herculean figure. And he's maybe the best offensive player we've ever seen. And if he came back and had lost some weight, would he be better? Maybe not. I don't know. We certainly saw Oladipo make a leap, and everyone attributed it to the fact that he got ripped in the offseason. But was it also the fact that he just went to a new situation and had accumulated another year of experience, and in his 4th year in the league, or 5th year, was now primed, entering 26, 27 years old, to make that kind of leap with a larger role in outside of Oklahoma City? There's just so many moving parts in these kind of like this anecdotal things that we use for evidence for Jahlil Okafor becoming a vegan, and his spin move now rotates like 15% faster.
Right, like Porzingis turning into Ivan Drago. Everyone was hoping he'd be a beast down under, or in the paint, and he's just popping long range shots. I'm like, when are you gonna use those elbows, man? He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna take this long range.
Well, that's a good point, right? There are certainly places where this works, like Tim Duncan saying that he lost a bunch of weight and that enabled him to take the pressure off of his knees, and he had a longer career because of it.
He's also one of the best players of all time, like from birth. He was destined.
We also don't have an alternative timeline in which he kept gaining weight and bowed out of the NBA 5 years earlier. We just don't know.
Or played another 5 years as the round mound of rebound 2. More mound.
Almond Joy. More mounds.
I've grown to really love Almond Joy, by the way. Happy Halloween.
Is that the one with coconut?
Yeah, there's Mounds, which has no almond, and Almond Joy, which has that one almond. And I didn't like them as a kid, but I bought a little grab bag for it in the spirit of the holiday, and they're really good. I enjoy them, man.
I think they might be candies that are for adults that are mistakenly viewed in the same category as like Halloween treats for kids.
Yeah, you don't want your kid to try Good and Plenty before they're ready at age like 40.
You can always tell if something's not really for kids if they have a dark chocolate version. Oh. And Mounds definitely did, right?
Yeah. I like dark chocolate, a mainstream dark chocolate, because there's just more sugar in it and there's more flavor. So if you look at like Hershey's dark chocolate, it has more sugar than the milk chocolate, but it has more bitterness too. And I'm a bitter dude, so I enjoy that.
Yeah, you're bitter as hell.
Yeah.
Bitter boys.
Remember when, Lamar Odom's dark, but because of candy. But remember when Trevor Ariza was drafted and he was addicted to junk food? And we hear about players like Hidu Turkoglu eating a whole Domino's pizza right before he steps out for warm-ups in big games. And I think
Steph Curry says he's addicted to Sour Patch Kids, that he doesn't have like
and buttered
incredible
popcorn.
Problem like he can't in which it's just insurmountable. But also these guys have metabolisms that are like fucking burning.
Yeah. And you hear stories about player locker rooms in the 70s where they're all drinking beer at halftime and like smoking cigarettes. And I wonder what we're doing now that's just going to be so ridiculous. And my guess is
They were on their phones looking at blue light.
or it's going to be like they were eating real meat.
I mean, honestly, that doesn't even sound weird.
Yeah.
That, like in 20 years, like, can you believe NBA players used to eat like cattle?
Yeah.
He says sit there with like a haunch of a cow.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you believe
As an athlete?
they went to Houston and ate barbecue 2 days before the game?
I believe it.
No, yeah, that is a reality that's coming, I think. But it's also a process of getting older, and you don't want to zap the joy out of anyone's life. And I don't think these guys are going to give up Fortnite. But this is where the boomer thing comes in, which is like how badly do they want it? Are they waking up early? And until we switch the culture, until a team that's smart enough to switch the culture and say we're going to practice not as much and we're going to let you sleep in a little bit and we're going to do walkthroughs instead of full scrimmages, this thing won't really shift. And it's going to take generations until maybe the boomers are not around as much anymore.
Also, not to bring up Allen Iverson and say that, this guy couldn't have been better, but we saw someone who led the league in minutes, was completely tireless, worked so hard on the court. And we know he ate junk food. I was with him on the first day of training camp when he was like 33 years old in Memphis. And instead of eating with the team who had private chefs cooking up healthier fare, he had his buddy and like mentor, Gary Moore, who I was driving with, stop by Hong Kong Seafood in Birmingham, Alabama, and pick up styrofoam cartons of like chicken wings.
Yes.
And he took them back to his hotel suite and was like sitting there on the bed watching the WNBA and a special about Michael Jackson while eating chicken wings. And his buddy was on the floor with like a cup of Hennessy. And this was late in his career. This was on the downslope of his career. He had already put in all those seasons leading the league in minutes. Yeah. Like, would he have been better if he had been a vegan who watched his sleeping patterns? He might have been. But it doesn't change the fact that Allen Iverson was a freaking monster.
Exactly. And there's too many moving parts here. I remember that study that came out, I think, last year, where it was clear that alcohol, even in moderation, was just awful for you. Every single sip of alcohol is bad for you. There's no such thing as having one cocktail and having it like the French paradox of having a glass of wine with dinner. Although they quickly went to say that people who do just let themselves drink in moderation live longer lives because they seem to be happier. And you get into the situation where Allen Iverson, maybe towards the end of his career, didn't seem happy. He didn't seem happy in Memphis. He maybe seemed a little exhausted and fatigued, his soul felt tired. And
Allen Iverson came from a background
wings.
of pretty extensive trauma, I would suspect. Whether it was his home situation, their living conditions and poverty, the violence in his community. Allen Iverson may not have been someone who did a lot of counseling and had a lot of therapy. He could be someone who is still suffering the effects, even with fame and even with stardom and even with such success. That's part of him from where he came from, and that's intractable from Allen Iverson, the basketball hero. Mm-hmm. And when you hear stories about him, peeing in a garbage can in a Detroit casino and
the Bieber, as they say.
Yeah, and his domestic situation and where he is in his life right now with his money. Like, these things are probably tied to parts of Allen Iverson that never did get addressed. And it might not have anything to do with like his diet or his commitment to practice. People are complex.
Yeah, and I think we'd be surprised if, even, for example, if we asked Allen Iverson why, even though he knows eating chicken wings in his hotel room is bad for him, he does it. And there's a good chance his answer would be like, makes me think of where I grew up in my childhood. And the food is easily kind of directional toward something like that. But
when he was playing in Turkey, I remember they said that he would just eat McDonald's. He wasn't like in for like the whole like donor.
Well,
he didn't buy in with like the baba ganoush.
Well, that's what Enes Kanter said when he came to New York, that he was so happy that there was a Turkish food scene. And that's what NBA players always talk about when they go to China. They say there's nothing to eat. They always bring that up. And even when I think Rachel Nichols came back from China this last trip, she was talking about all the Hong Kong controversy. And she even brought up the food. She said, man, was I glad to be in an American cafeteria again. Because it's a cultural divide. And I believe if we're talking about wellness and getting enough sleep, that's directly attached to happiness and the ways to address loneliness when you're on the road, even in China. But if you're in Memphis, Tennessee, playing a game versus the Grizzlies, and you're from Philly, you feel some sort of way. And I don't know. This is more whist coming in, but I think if the sooner NBA teams address this complicated feeling, the sooner success is around the corner.
So you want NBA teams to have a whist doctor?
They have one. They're required to have one now.
A wistfulness expert?
You mean a psychiatrist? Isn't that literally what they are? Whist identifiers?
Oh, your whist is really going through the roof here today.
Your whist is my command.
Look, what I'm going to say is I understand, Inez. You've had to switch to a diet of baked beans, and it's really hard for you to find hummus, and your whist is cratering right now.
Through the roof. Turkish food is delicious, man.
It's fantastic. You know what else is fantastic?
This pod.
And what else is fantastic? The Cookies Hoops Classic. Oh, you see what I did there?
We'll be talking about this one for years.
Oh my goodness. Cookies Hoop Classic, October 19th. 100 Dobbin Street at BK Post. Game started at 2 p.m. Come through, hang out.
Please come through.
Perfect pod.
We'd love to meet you, and we're going to have a great time. And yeah, man, I'm excited. We're putting a lot of work into this, so please come through and enjoy everything.
The perfect pod and the perfect basketball tournament.
Wow.
Cookies Hoops.
2 for 2.
Cookies. That's terrible.